What's up, fucker? It's your boy, Slacky J, Fights Gone By podcast, coming at you on Monday the 26th of October, following UFC 254, Habib versus Gaethje. And it was a good night of fights, and it had a spectacular ending. And caveat up front, I will be talking about, Habib's retirement and, the fact that I'm not super stoked about GOAT discussions and shit like that. I honestly could not give two shits about who's the greatest of all time, by whatever metric you want to measure. But we'll talk about that in a minute, because right now I'm going to gush over this fight because I'm going to say it was one of the most amazing things I've seen in professional fighting, probably, of any kind. And I say that because of the caliber of the opposition, the injuries and misfortunes going into the fight, and the sort of scenario? Yeah. Basically, Khabib Nurmagomedov, no, the ring cutting didn't get better. I know it's a bit of a meme, me talking about Khabib's ring cutting at this point, and people got so mad. I very carefully caveated my discussion of that when I said a little bit Rousey-like, in that a lot of it has revolved around his opponents running themselves onto the fence, and people still manage to get butthurt about that and go, comparing him to Rousey? How dare you? Rousey couldn't box. And you're like, hold up. But no, the ring cutting did not get better in this one. And that's almost part of why it's so impressive. The man applied the most inscrutable pressure I've seen him apply in his career. And he did it by walking through the counter punches of the hardest hitter in the division, getting kicked in the leg while completely out of position for it, and apparently being on a broken foot at the time. So it's just fucking amazing. I think that's the thing. He willed himself into position in this fight at several points. Did it through tenacity more than anything else. He took we were talking about how much we like Gaethje with that clubbing left hook that he lands on the counter and that intercepting right hand. Habib took both of those flush at some point in the fight, several points in the fight actually, and just sort of ducked his head down and went, okay, let's keep going. And that is insane, because Tony Ferguson has done that to everyone he's fought. Then he fought Gaethje, and Gaethje turned him back with the power punching, with the counter punching, which is part of why Gaethje had so much trouble here. We were talking about footwork before this, and I said I don't think Gaethje's the man to be doing the defensive ring craft and getting out of the way and the direction changes and things. And if you saw, he was trying to stay off the fence, but he was basically sprinting for it. He was ducking his head down and running in one direction. It wasn't that sort of Eddie Alvarez. Here we go, Eddie Alvarez again. But, that sort of measured, floating around the cage one way then the other. The good ring craft, the Holly Holm style ring craft. It was very much like he was under pressure the entire time, but he was very much running for it. Because when he was fighting Tony, another really good swarming, overwhelming sort of fighter, he was able to turn him back with power hitting. And that, if you watch that Tony Ferguson fight, he's able to fight at a nice striking range distance and measure himself more because he makes Tony step back. This one, he's clubbing Habib as hard as he can, trying to get him off him for a moment, and Habib just never does. It's absolutely incredible. And the low kicks worked as well as we thought they would. He kicked him, Habib's foot went across himself, his knee buckled in, he stumbled, and you're like, wow, a couple of those and he's going to be out of there. And he just ran in. He was like, oh, my leg's fucked. Better keep running on it. But we talked about this in the Killing the King, which you should still read. I mean, even though it's double hypothetical now because he's retired, we talked about in Killing the King, you cannot be waiting until if you wait until you're behind the black line, which is how a lot of fighters gauge their distance from the cage. That is still enough distance, or that's still close enough to the cage that Habib can do one of those long shots and crawl up onto the fence. And the very first takedown he gets, Gaethje's lingering around between the black line and the fence, and Habib just times him circling off, shoots in, snatches up his legs and hits the fence and just pulls his legs out from underneath him. It was absolutely lovely, and the distance he covered on it was amazing, especially with a fucked up foot. And possibly a fucked up knee from the low kick he'd already taken. But the second takedown, the one in the second round, was more impressive to me because we talked about how Habib has typically not been very successful shooting with his takedowns naked. What he does is he shoots, gets to the fence, and it gets worse from there for his opponent. We talked about how, that early stage when he came into the UFC, where he was backing up and trying to shoot clean takedowns, that it just sort of stopped working, especially when he met. He had some good success against Belarus, but even Belarus stuffed a takedown or two, I seem to recall. But Tibau had success like that. And then he started learning to use the fence more. But in this one, he might have been on the fence, I can't remember, but he shot in on Gaethje. Gaethje sprawled, and he did a beautiful peek out and immediately went to the back and got top position, moved to mount, attacked the triangle immediately, and he was going after it like a man possessed. Because we were saying this last week, I was saying Habib doesn't seem like the kind of guy who desperately wants to finish in round one. He very much gains from putting more and more damage on people. If he gets a good position, he's so good from the top positions and the dominant positions that if the fight progresses with him there, the more time he's there, the worse it is for the bottom man. So he's never been one to rush a finish, like the Poirier and the McGregor finishes. He attacked him early, but the finishes came late, and like the Michael Johnson one too. This one, both times he got on Gaethje, he was like a man possessed going for the submission. It was a really nice armbar attack in the first round too, where he switched off to an arm crush. I was looking at it going, good effort, but you are not. You can do damage with an arm crush, and that's something that surprises a lot of people because it's banned in. I think it's all the way up to brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The bicep slicer and the calf slicer. You can fuck someone up with it, but it's also the sort of hold that dudes can absolutely just sit in and go, no, I'm not tapping to that. Whereas if you hyperextend someone's arm, and you start winding it around your leg, the referee's either going to stop it or you can let go of it and go, okay, well now I'll just continue beating him up entirely on this side that I've broken his arm. Bicep slice is very hard to get taps out of in, I'd say, competition generally. If people's adrenaline's pumping, you're not going to finish them with a bicep slicer, probably. But the triangle was gorgeous. Shout out to my boy Craig Jones, who just this week I finished the Killing the King. I banged together that podcast quickly, and then I saw Craig Jones had sent me his new DVD. Yeah, he sent me a copy of that. Well, the download of it, which was really sweet. Thank you for that, Craig. And I started watching it. Really good stuff about finishing heel hooks, the first sections. And I was just getting onto the triangle stuff, and I was just getting onto the mounted triangle stuff. And the mounted triangle is something I really used to love back when I was sort of like white belt, early blue belt, getting into grappling because I loved the triangle choke. But I was also like all people who get into jiu-jitsu and haven't got a wrestling background, shit on top. So I was like, okay, well, how can I use my guard submission from top? But I sort of got away from it. I love arm triangles and things now. And it was really interesting. I was watching that going, nice, yeah, I'm going to use that. And then wouldn't you know it, Habib scores a triangle choke. Firstly, never happened in the UFC. And secondly, from top, what the fuck? Top mount even more. So he was really... You could tell he wanted to finish because Habib's career has been defined by keeping top position. He was, when we were talking about AKA not putting in the hooks from the back and just keeping back control and hitting for a while. And you notice that Habib will put in the back hooks, and that's typically where he finishes from, but he is very much in that school of get the back body lock, keep doing mat returns. The more they get up, the more I can mat return them and make them carry my weight and pick up, pile up the damage, pile up the exhaustion. And in this one, he was just hopping off to sacrifice top position to attempt submissions, both with the armbar and the triangle choke. So, and then, of course, he came out with the broken foot. That's a big part of it. But like I said, one of the most astonishing performances I've ever seen. Gaethje, I didn't think he was the man to beat Habib with his style necessarily, or certainly the styles that I would see giving Habib the most trouble, which are hypothetical and probably don't exist on a real person right now. But I didn't think he adhered to a lot of that. But even then, to be done, he had his moments on the feet where you're like, nice, I see something there. But for Habib to finish him that quickly when he got a hold of him, just incredible. But yeah, at the end of this one, I was getting, there's a few fights where as a man, you get a little bit weepy. And, I was just like, this one, Foreman beating Moura back in the day, there's a few that'll get you right in the heart. And just knowing the background around this one. And I'm going to call it back to the press, who I was so pissed off at throughout this entire build-up, where they kept asking about his dead dad. What would this mean to your dead dad? How's it been training without your dead dad? Your dad's dead, by the way. How do you feel about that? And they were still doing it after he snapped at that journalist about it. And then last week, I think it was, he said, I don't know why everyone's obsessed with me retiring. I'm not going to retire. I love competing. And, the moment he finishes the fight, he's bawling. He's retired. He said, I'm done. First camp without my dad, fucking sucked, hate it, I'm retiring now. And that is not someone doing that in the moment. Clearly, he knew he was going to retire coming in there, and he just lied to the press. And frankly, they fucking deserved it. Because can you imagine if it was also, in addition to dead dad questions, it'd be about retirement. Oh, what's your legacy? Do you think you'll go down as the greatest of all time? How would your dad feel about your legacy? Do you think your dad would want you to take more fights to get up to the total number of title defenses and whatnot? And, fuck him. Fuck the press. And then he left without answering any press questions, which is also top notch. Good work, Habib. The one thing that has annoyed me a bit, of course, is that after this fight, naturally he retires. Then people say, well, no one ever would have beaten him. And you're like, for fuck's sake, do you not know anything about lightweight MMA? BJ Penn never looked better than when he beat Kenny Florian. What was that, I won't even try and guess the year. But he beat Kenny Florian, and then people were like, who? Oh no, it's Diego Sanchez after that, because we were getting a bit desperate after Kenny Florian. People were like, who is even left for BJ Penn to fight? Frankie Edgar. Okay, but he's going to get choked out. And then Frankie Edgar comes out, wins that fight, wins the second fight even more convincingly. Just has BJ's number, has done all the work, has done the research. People weren't looking at him like the man to beat BJ, but he was. And I promise you, if Habib carried on for a few more years, that would probably happen. And it would probably be someone we gave no chance at all anyway. Because that is lightweight MMA. It is so fucking stacked. That's not taking away from Habib and his ability and his legacy. That's just saying that is how cutthroat this is. And that is more like how impressive he got that streak of wins there, to that level. But yes, no, we don't have to pretend that he never would have lost if he fought the other guys in his division. The weird part was, this event, they there were a couple of finishes and I was watching it live and I remembered, oh fuck, I hate watching it live because they have to throw back to the desk and talk bollocks and then they have to come back and put on a promo package for something which wasn't important enough that they would have shown it if the fights had gone the distance. So they start showing this Michael Chandler package and I'm like, oh, are they going to announce Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson or something? And then no, it was a Michael Chandler package and a Michael Chandler interview to announce that Michael Chandler is not going to be fighting. It was just so stupid. And then they're like, at the end of it, they go, and so Michael, who are you going to fight next? And he's like, I need some time off. just like, what was the point of doing that? And then, after this, people are going, well, now we need a lightweight tournament to decide who's the champion. So, top 4 lightweights. And they're including Michael Chandler. And you're like, what the fuck has Michael Chandler done? They couldn't say Bellator in their introduction of Chandler or their package about him because they're petty like that. They don't, it's always champion in another organisation, but not an important enough organisation that we say it. They couldn't use any of the footage. John Alex said Benson Henderson, but I think they were probably briefed not to say him because Daniel Cormier kept going oh, the champion, you beat a former UFC champion in your last fight. But you can't show any footage of him. So we're just supposed to, well, I suppose that's the advantage. If you haven't seen him lay on Goiti Yamauchi and Brent Primus through round 2 and 3 because he was tired, you won't know that that's his game. His game. He tries to knock people out for the first round, then he lays on them against the cage. But he's played an absolute blinder. He got paid to not fight the best in the world in Bellator. He got paid to not fight the best in the world by being the backup for this Gaethje versus Habib fight. And now he's going to be moved into the title picture, while guys like Charles Oliveira has fought better opposition than Michael Chandler. Beneil Dariush has probably fought better opposition than Michael Chandler. Paul Felder has fought better opposition than Michael Chandler. Dan Hooker has fought better opposition than Michael Chandler. I love Benson Henderson, but he's past his best, and he's easily the best fighter that Michael Chandler has beaten in the last 5 years. Eddie Alvarez is a good win, but then Eddie Alvarez came back, fought better, and easily handled Michael Chandler. Maybe he's the man to beat Habib, but we'll never know now. Oh my god, if he ever wins the UFC title, fucking hell. I would like him to have at least 3 or 4 fights before he gets to shoot for it, to be honest, because there's more, being in that division of killers is so much harder than being outside the UFC and then coming in and being like, title shot, please? As Will Brooks will attest. But now he's tweeting I just got back from Abu Dhabi, can't wait to take the title, but I need some time with my family. I'm starting to think that Michael Chandler's UFC title run is going to be like Wilt Chamberlain versus Muhammad Ali, where Wilt Chamberlain did all the chat shows with Muhammad Ali, talking about how he's going to fight him, and then never did. But we'll have plenty of time to, slag off Bellator champions who couldn't make it in the UFC when Mousasi fights later this week. Let's talk about the rest of this card. You had Robert Whitaker versus Jared Cannonier, a great fight on paper, which I forgot was happening. I was so excited for Gaethje versus Habib. This was pretty good. It was a good performance from Rob in that he dealt with a very dangerous fighter pretty much flawlessly up until about 20 seconds before the end where he got clipped. But it was a little bit one note in places. I know a lot of people were very hot on this performance, using that lovely bounce, I want to say point fighting, but, jab-led performance is quite interesting because, the jab is obviously the staple of boxing. Yet a lot of guys who have boxing backgrounds don't always apply it the best in MMA. Whereas point fighters generally, the guys who come from the play tag background, people who've been in traditional martial arts and done traditional martial arts sort of point fighting competition, they tend to apply the jab pretty well, as in as a long point fighting weapon. They tend also not to follow up on it too well, or they'll follow up with the right hand and they'll sort of stand there. If you watch someone like, Wonderboy gets in with the 1-2 really well, but Michael Venom Page gets across the floor really quickly with the jab. Does it mainly against scrubs, but, he's very quick with it. And Robert Whitaker obviously came from a Hapkido background, I believe, which I think does point fighting competition stuff too. But it's quite interesting because Rob Whitaker used to be a cracking left hook and a low lead hand, and he'd be very much more there for his opponents. But then even in his recent performances, you'll see he does change his strategy, and use and fight differently to different opponents. This fight was quite different to the one with Darren Till, even though he used a lot of the same weapons. It was quite odd seeing Rob without his left hook basically the entire fight, though, because it is such a terrific money punch for him. But if you throw the left hook, you're entering a firefight. You are as liable to get caught with the opponent's left hook as you are to land your own. And that's what you don't want to be doing with Cannonier, putting yourself in position to trade and be counterpunched because he's such a big hitter. And it's quite interesting because obviously Jack Hermansson had done decently with the jab in some of his recent ones, but he was doing it from much closer range. He wasn't bouncing in with a big spearing jab. He was applying volume, standing in front of people, showing them shoulder feints, shooting the jab, shooting combinations too. And then when he met Cannonier, he was paralyzed. He couldn't really get in and out, and he'd go in and get hit. Whereas Rob was able to work from a much greater range in this one. What I really liked from Cannonier was getting on the low kicks early. That would have been, something that basically, if you're fighting someone who's going to be fighting out of range or wants to stay at long range and not step in for long combinations or long exchanges against you, you want to slow them down. And one way to do that is to hurt them with low kicks. Another way to do that is to low kick them until they stand a little bit less bladed, because you can get in forward and back much faster if you're standing nice and bladed and long with 1 foot behind you or 1 foot in front of you, working on like a train track, than you can when you're squaring up to check kicks or take kicks. And I thought his game plan was pretty sound. I mean, he didn't really have a lot else other than the low kicks, but I thought the low kicking was a sound idea. Rob was doing a decent job of checking them, but still getting hit by a lot of them. And it really just came down to Rob doing more than Cannonier was able to do. Lots of single jabs, lots of jabs into right straights, the odd right-hand lead, and of course that 1-2 right high kick that he loves. Does it like Peter Ayats a lot of the time. He'll either start stabbing you so much with the straight blows that you move your head and then he'll just put them out there and kick you in the head, or he might even throw his right hand to the left so that it goes down the side of your shoulder and encourages you to feel like you've slipped it. Peter Ayats used to throw his right hand almost past the opponent's head and then turn it palm into their head and just push them into the head kick. And he did it about 8 times in this fight, but he caught Cannonier for real with it in the 3rd round, I think it was, and almost knocked him out, which was pretty impressive, because that would have been 2 rounds of doing that just to set up the knockout, but he couldn't finish, unfortunately. The thing that I really liked, that I would love to see more from Rob, is in the 2nd round he went he threw a nice 1-2, scored the 2, and immediately dug the right underhook. Changed levels slightly, dug the right underhook, and took the body lock, ran through into a takedown. And he's got that ability. He's got the ability to wrestle. And if you hit the right hand first, it's like Gunnar Nelson didn't have great takedowns, but score the right hand and take the body lock, suck their hips in, or drop on their hips and start the takedown while they're still stinging from the right hand. Punch and clutch, baby. We talk about it all the time, or we have talked about it all the time in the past. And that's what Rob could do more of in his fights in the future. If become a better, he's gone from like sprawl and brawler to outsidey sort of fighter, and I would just love to see him apply the wrestling that he's worked so hard on in an offensive capacity. Not a bad fight, not quite as good as, well, certainly not as good as I'd hoped it could be, but, you know, when you watch a guy basically disarm a very, very dangerous opponent like that, who everyone's really been struggling with at middleweight, you know, you can't argue too much with not getting enough excitement out of it. Especially as he was working the entire time. You know, it wasn't him laming it out. He was still scoring punches and stuff. Alexander Volkov versus Walt Harris was, I thought, a really good showing from Volkov. I think they said he came in heavier than usual, or is walking around heavier than usual. He looked like he'd put on a little bit of muscle. He put on some shocking back tattoos. But yeah, Volkov looked really measured, really smooth and calculated in this one. And everyone was super stoked that my tweet at the start of the fight was Volkov should be leaning on his right front kick in this one a lot, because Harris is a southpaw, stands quite wide, a little bit squarer. You're going to be able to get there with it, and it's one that makes it hard for him to come back at you with punches if it hits him in the gut. Even if it's like crumpled when it hits him in the gut, even if your knee's not extended. And then he proceeded to not do that much for the next 1 round, 2 rounds, whatever it was. Yeah, 1 round. And then in the second round, he just kicked him in the gut with a right body kick and knocked him out. And I didn't mean, like, I see a big glaring weakness here. If you hit him, he'll fall down. I just meant, like, that's something that he could have got away with without much repercussions. I think it might have been a toe kick. When they showed the replay, it looked like he caught him with his big toe. Which, if someone could actually get good at applying a toe kick in MMA, for these front kicks that people keep landing, you know, the front kick is one of the best techniques in MMA right now, because it's very hard to pick up and finish a takedown on a front kick, because you're right on the end of the leg, and as soon as you grab the foot, they're just going to kick their foot over the top of your hands. Unless you do a really good, you know, Sanshao, Muay Thai catch, one hand above, one hand below. But the toe kick is fascinating because, you know, obviously you're not wearing gloves on your feet. There's nothing to stop you using your toes like that. But it reminds me a lot of Battling Nelson. Fascinating character. I was reading like an old Mark Hatmaker book where he was talking about the half scissor left hook. But then if you read Battling Nelson's own memoir, he says, yeah, I was a crap fighter before I learned this one technique, and then I was a world-class fighter. And it's really weird because he was very open about it, and he was also like, it's also a technique that you won't be able to do in modern gloves. And this was back then, you know, he was saying you wouldn't be able to do it in modern gloves. But when the gloves, certainly, I mean, they taped the thumb to the glove much later, but gloves got bigger between Battling Nelson fighting and writing his memoir. But basically, he used his thumb and index finger and made like a little L sign, and he jammed that into the liver from in close with a left hook, so palm down, but left hook with the thumb and the finger, and with the padding on the glove, it protected his finger and thumb enough, but he was still able to dig it in. You know, you're getting a lot of pressure because it's such a small striking surface, and that's the same thing with the toe kick. You know, it's not, you probably won't be able to kick as hard without hurting your toes unless you practice for ages, like the Uechi Ryu guys who spend their whole lives working on it. But then by the time you've got these gnarly deformed toes, you're 50 years old. Kiyohide Shinjo is one to look at for that, because he was, he's about, you know, if you want to talk about like karate masters, he's one in the old school sort of mold, because he actually, his fingers and toes and shit were just like he could jam them through wood and stuff. Probably couldn't box, but if he caught a good fighter with a front kick to the body, he could probably do some damage. I mean, there was a Genki Sudo, after his MMA career, he went down to Okinawa to train with the Uechi Ryu guys and write a mook, I believe they're called, about them. And he took a toe kick from an old man. And, you know, this guy's been kicked in the body by Albert Kraus. And apparently he said that, like, I was doubled over from this relatively light toe kick. I think there's a lot of room. Who else? Skarbowski. Actually, another shout out to BJJ Fanatics, because I was watching Skarbowski's Muay Thai DVDs, which are really good. You know, he's a world-class Nak Muay. Well, he's a Thai-class Nak Muay from France, or was during his day. And he was a really big fan of just short, lighter teeps, but with the toes. And he was like, and I try and hit him in the bladder. You're like, oh, that's so cruel. But yeah, it looked like a toe kick on this one. If you could master the toe kick in MMA, you would have so much fun kicking people in the body, because the front kick is almost like the body jab. People just don't want to deal with it, or don't deal with it. They're like, oh, I'll just poker face it. But great to see Volkov back on track. I sort of wrote him off after that really dumb letting Derek Lewis get back into the fight after shutting him out. And shame for Walt Harris, because obviously all the tragedy that's gone on in his life, but he seemed in good spirits about it. So definitely a loss he could learn from. Phil Hawes versus Jacob Malkoun. I said last week I didn't know who these guys were, and then in 18 seconds there was a knockout. And I was like, I mean, that was good, but now we've got 14 minutes to fill on the broadcast. Thanks, lads. But this one, I mean, Phil Hawes, firstly, short and stocky for a middleweight, because he was standing next to Anik and he was about the same height, and I know that Anik's not a huge dude. And middleweights generally are big lads. If you see him in the gym, if you've got a middleweight in your gym, he's probably one of the bigger lads. But most of this was on Malkoun, who he came out and literally backed himself onto the cage. I say quite a lot that MMA fighters do it, but just clearly had no idea where the fence was until he was on it. And he voluntarily did that. He was like, I'm just going to move around a bit. Oh, no, I'm on the fence. But great for Phil Hawes. He comes out of this looking amazing. Lauren Murphy versus Lilia Shakirova. I was snarkily tweeting and making a risotto during this risotto, whatever you want to call it. We call it a risotto over here. But I was doing that while this was going on, and it was shit. Someone, it fucking baffles me that, I mean, there's no point putting this on the card, the paid portion of the card anyway. That's just an insult. You're going, oh yeah, this is a portion of your $65. But more than anything, if you're getting people to tune in for Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is the biggest star in MMA, or one of, certainly has the enormous appeal in Russia. It's the most followed Russian athlete on Instagram, and he does amazing viewership numbers because of the McGregor bump as well. So he's got worldwide, people know who he is, and people will pay to see him fight. You've got one of your biggest stars on the card. Why not use that to elevate some talent? You could have had two great lightweight fights in that sort of middle bit of the division that people aren't talking about in the lightweight tournament they want, but should certainly be considered dangerous in the lightweight division. You could have like the Charles Oliveira's, the Beneil Dariush's, I mean, obviously not them if they're injured or they don't have the time or whatever, or rather they're training for something else. But you could have had two more good lightweight fights on here. There was one lightweight fight on the card. How crazy is that? It's like when they had Conor versus Eddie, and they had Habib on the early prelims, which isn't as bad because at least you've got them there, but you're not doing anything to build further interest. Was it Habib versus Conor? You had Tony versus Anthony Pettis, and then obviously everyone was excited for Tony versus Habib after that event. It's not hard. This is not rocket science. Why are you putting Lauren Murphy and Lilia Shakirova in a place where people are there already, having paid for the event, they're watching it, and you've just had that great fight between Ankalaev versus Kutalaba? I appreciate you might want to put in some sort of piss break match, but use this time to just sell someone interesting. And then they wonder why they can't make... I think they're scared to make stars more than anything. I think they want the UFC to be a brand. They can't do that without making stars, but they'd rather only have one star at a time, and then you just tune in for the UFC. Anyway, Magomed Ankalaev versus Ion Kutalaba. Perfect. Just Ion Kutalaba got... there was a much more decisive knockout. Ion Kutalaba was actually pretty cool about it, which was surprising for him. But, I was actually... In this one, I think it was Kutalaba was catching him with the lead hook after Ankalaev was squaring up to throw his rear hand straight, whichever one was fighting southpaw and one was fighting orthodox. I can't remember because they both switch. But, he was getting caught with the lead hook, and I was going, oh, better watch that lead hook. And then it was Magomed Ankalaev's lead hook that knocked out Kutalaba. So it was just, 205-pound men swinging hands. One is probably going to get knocked out. But Ankalaev back on track. I mean, he was back on track already. But for some reason, that loss to the Joubert just ruined his hype train. No one cares. I've been saying this for ages, but Ankalaev's really good. You should keep an eye on him. And nobody seems to care. I was thinking the same about, Gregor Gillespie. I would still consider him very much live in that lightweight heap. But one hard loss, and some time off, and everyone's just forgotten about him. They're not even mentioning him in these matchups. What else was on? Tai Tuivasa versus Stefan Struve was a sloppy mess, and then Tai Tuivasa wanted to do a shoey and seemed really annoyed. He was like, how will people know about me if I don't do the shoey? It was kind of a flaccid knockout, to be honest. It was just Stefan Struve standing on the fence and then falling over. both those lads should be cut, to be honest. Then probably the best fight of the night was Casey Kenny versus Nathaniel Wood. Shout out to DC, he did a slacky. He called Casey Kenny Courtney Casey. I mean, they're in the middle of the fight and stuff is going on, but I do that all the time. Like last week I did Alexander Volkanovski versus Walt Harris. My best one was when I was talking about Jerome Labana fighting Amanda Nunes. He'd batter her. But yeah, Kenny versus Nathaniel Wood was really good fun. What you saw a lot was Nathaniel Wood has the tighter, nicer left hook, but Kenny was making opportunities for his left hook to land more. He was kicking lots, and he was using the kick as like a bludgeon to get Wood coming back at him. There was some really I put up a gif of one of them, but really lovely occasions of him kicking hard into the leg or the body, and then picking his knee up to do it again, but then just faking and coming down with the lead hook to counter as Nathaniel Wood tried to step in on the kick. I thought Nathaniel Wood sort of fell into the same thing as that lad, the Mongolian lad who last fought Kenny, where he realised very late that he could have been mixing in the wrestling. You know, he obviously Kenny got his scholarship in wrestling or whatever, but that, you know, this is MMA, it's not wrestling. If he's busy kickboxing, he's not there ready to sprawl. So you could actually be doing stuff. And he picked up a single at one point, and you know, things like post singles, you know, the Frankie Edgar hand in the shoulder, pick up the leg, you know, stuff where you're not going to get sprawled on, you're not going to get stuck on your knees, you're not going to get front headlocked. It's just stuff that's there. And if you get the takedown, great. If you didn't, you picked his leg up, you got him off balance, carry on. You've got him thinking about the takedown now. But these two just kicked 7 bells out of each other. It was fantastic. Yeah, someone pointed out, and I was getting this in the fight, Casey Kenny, there is shades of TJ there, TJ Dillashaw. You know, it's a good wrestler who's using stance switching, has that natural, well, maybe not, I'm probably learned, but has picked up on what techniques go in from what stance matchup very well. Very good at using feints and getting the opponent anticipating and then drawing the opponent on. You know, not necessarily the mechanics of good striking, but the ideas that make good striking. And then he was tiring out in the second and third, and I was thinking, how did TJ Dillashaw deal with that? And then I went, oh, yeah, about that. Oh, I think that's about it for the good stuff on this card. I mean, Alex Oliveira got strangled by some jobber that they brought in at the last minute, I believe. Missed weight, so he cheated before the fight even started. What a hero. And then, yeah, arming guillotine. He was just leaning on him on the fence. The guy went over the back of the head. And if you watch the finish, really nice for what most people, well, you know, what most good arming guillotiners will teach. I've seen dudes finish it leaning back, but there's a few different like grips and things you can finish an arming guillotine with. But for most people, the best arming guillotine is more to, you know, you don't lean back and try and pull his head off. You crunch in and you're using your hands to close off his windpipe, and you crunch your whole body up to try and make it harder to peel your hands away. And if you look, like Oliveira's trying to stack up, and this guy is almost like kissing between Oliveira's shoulder blades. He's so curled up, crunched in on that guillotine. So all in all, not a bad night of fights. What else happened this week? Oh, the only other thing that really was notable happening this weekend was Josh Barnett's bare-knuckle boxing, but with clinch match, which, honestly, was fucking awesome. I mean, he was doing the things that I was most enjoying about his recent MMA career, but in a bare-knuckle match. It was so good. It was KSW Genesis, and I think this is because of Josh's recent trouble with, was it another failed test for Bellator? Because I think he's under MMA contract to Bellator, so this is a way around that. Might not be. Don't take my word on that. But I was just like, why is Josh doing bare knuckle boxing? Because you never know with Josh. I've said it before, he's a serial dabbler. He'll turn up in MMA, do amazing shit that no one else is doing in the heavyweight division for one fight, and then he'll disappear for a while. He'll do some pro wrestling just because he feels like it. He'll grapple in Meta Morris against Dean Lister, submit him for the first time in 16 years, and then not really grapple again. He's a dude who does his own thing, and it can be quite frustrating, but I sense that he's enjoying himself. But this was really, really nice. Like, I mean, his opponent was another 40-year-old heavyweight, but he was a Polish kickboxer, and he fought in KSW in MMA, and I think his most recent MMA fight was a win. So not terrible, and certainly not a terrible striker in the heavyweight scheme of things. But Barnett, I mean, firstly, a man who loves his combat sports history and his technique study and stuff like that, but he was using the stuff that he'd been doing against Mir and Roy Nelson when he just clinch fought the shit out of them. Like, his dirty boxing is some of the most interesting dirty boxing you will see in MMA, full stop. But not only was doing that, he was fighting well with his boxing out of range, but he was also very measured. He was aware that he could break his hands on this guy's head, because so many guys get into bare knuckle and immediately break their hands. Because you can punch a lot harder with gloves on than you can without gloves, without fucking up your fingers. Because your fingers are on the front of your fist. Even if you're trying to hit with the knuckles, your fingers will make contact, probably. Unless you punch really weird, they will make contact, and they'll probably get some force put on them. But one of the interesting things I thought I saw was that it seemed like Josh's hand wraps were thinner than the other guys. Like, he'd not thinner in terms of the material. I mean, he had wrapped his hands less than the other guy, which is always interesting in bare knuckle, because bare knuckle with wraps is just, it's different to bare knuckle, because bare knuckle, you're worrying about your own hands and wrists. Bare knuckle with wraps, you've wrapped yourself up, and if you wrap enough, you can almost make a glove for yourself. So that's always interesting too. But he's just like that. He was double hand fighting on the guy's guard, and then he'd pop a little jab up the middle or throw a double jab into a right hand, enter the clinch with his shoulder, and then he was just all over this guy. The clinch fighting in this one is so much fun. I mean, the guy had fought in MMA, so clearly he has some wrestling experience, but even guys like Roy Nelson and Frank Mir had no idea what to do when Barnett was gripping all over them. He's taking like a 2-on-1 baseball bat grip on one wrist, leaning into you with his chest, and then freeing one hand to hit you with 3 or 4 short uppercuts on the inside, and he'll change off to a single collar tie on the other side. It's so entertaining. And I think fights under that rule set would be pretty fucking fun, because you allow the clinch. I think elbows were allowed in this one, because, I saw Josh land elbows, so I hope they're allowed in this one. But, if you allow that, and you allow the clinch work, I think that makes it really interesting. This is something I said about bare knuckle generally. They don't seem to be calling... I mean, it was a deliberate decision in this one not to call the collar ties and things, but in other things like BKFC, they don't seem to be calling single collar tie work. So if you're the MMA fighter against the boxer, slow them down, get the single collar tie, hammer them with some hockey punches. You should be... There are a lot of ways you can hold and hit, and if they're not calling it, that's an advantage for the MMA fighter every time. And the other thing was they had a square cage. I've seen them before. They don't look as good, I'll be honest. They don't look as good as a 8-sided cage, and they don't look as good as a ring. But you get that, all the stuff that the nerds say they love about the ring, when you're saying the ring's shit, without all the stuff that you then point at and go, well, that's why the ring is crap. People are falling through it all the time. Might be overhyping it. I mean, it's not a big name that Josh beat. Well, I mean, it's the only name in this form of bare knuckle boxing, or bare knuckle upright clinch fighting. But certainly interesting. And if you want to see, Josh Barnett always brings something interesting technically to the table. And I think that's the reason that I am so patient with his disappearing, reappearing, and all that stuff. He's just so much fun to watch when you get to watch him. So yeah, watch that. I'm going to head out of here for today. I'll be back later in the week to talk about both Bellator and the UFC. Help me decide. I want to do something this week. I can't decide whether I do something on Gegard Mousasi and Douglas Lima, which is, an interesting fight, or I do something on Anderson Silva, maybe like a Filthy Casual's Guide or something, just to sort of wrap him up, because this is his last fight of his career, and obviously, for as much fun as I've had making fun of his fans, he was an incredibly important person, incredibly important to my personal study of striking, my career in MMA, my enjoyment watching MMA, first and foremost. He's amazing fun back in the day. And yeah, I thought it would be nice to do something for him. But I've done a lot of Anderson Silva stuff, and I've not really done much, serious stuff on Mousasi, and I don't think I've done much on Lima, aside from that piece I did for Fightland about the Welterweight Grand Prix. So you tell me what you want to see, because, I'm independent and you guys are the ones who pay me. So, yeah. Answers on a postcard sent to Broadcasting House, or just in the YouTube comments. If you want to read the Killing the King article I did last week, which was big, it was really a big article. I put a lot of thought into it. A lot of film study and a lot of very careful choice of words, because I know people get angry about me. People get mad about, Jack said he's like Ronda Rousey. What? No. Very carefully, in a single context, I was talking about something between the two of them. Very carefully written article, which you should go and read. And now it's, you can read it, and then when Michael Chandler wins the lightweight belt, you can be like, well, would Michael Chandler beat Habib? Let's see what Killing the King says. And of course, all the other stuff we do, get in on that, support the podcast, join the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. And sincerely, thank you, Khabib Nurmagomedov. It was, you had a spectacular career. Cheers.